Okay, dear all, as we are already behind our schedule, we are directly starting the first session, which is under the title of Awareness on Healthy Building, Building Biology and Accessibility. In this session, we are welcoming 6 presenters. Architect Pembe Gül Öztürk from Nuh Naci Yazkan University in Kayseri, Turkey. Civil Engineer Kenichi Curtis Onuchi from Cyprus International University in North Cyprus. Architect Shadi Zare Shahabadi from Yazd University in Iran. And Associate Professor Dr. Ufuk Fatih Küçükyalı from Istanbul Aydın University in Istanbul. And Architect Didar Tashkan from Yıldız Technical University in Istanbul. And finally, the Associate Professor Dr. İrem Gencer from Yıldız Technical University in Istanbul. We are kindly asking you to fit yourself into the duration of 15 minutes. And after the presentations, we will have additional 15 minutes to discussion. I will notify the attendees that you can always send your questions in written format through the chat box. And our colleagues in the organizing committee, they will forward your questions directly to the presenters. Kindly write the name of the presenter and then your question. So, okay, Ömer, buyurun. If you want to add something in Turkish.
Başlayabiliriz. Benim ekleyeceğim bir şey yok. Teşekkürler.
Okay, in that case we start with Pembe Gül Hanım. Buyurun.
Merhabalar. Sayın hocalarım, değerli katılımcılar, öncelikle hoş geldiniz. Sunumum yapı biyolojisi açısından kerpiç kullanımının etkileri üzerine olacaktır. Şimdi İnsanlar için barınma, beslenme gibi en temel ihtiyaçtır. Varoluşun ilk zamanlarından beri de böyle olmuştur. Geçmişte insanlar çevrelerinde buldukları doğal malzemelerle yapı oluşturmuşlar ve doğal malzemenin konforunu yaşamışlardır.
Sunum ekranını tam ekran yapabilirseniz daha belki iyi görülebilir.
Tamam. İnsanların barınma sağlayacakları yapılarda bazı şartların sağlanması gereklidir. Bunlar yapının sağlıklı ve konforlu bir çevresinin olması, kullanıcı için uygun sosyolojik ve psikolojik ihtiyaçların karşılanması ve tabii ki bu ihtiyaçların karşılanması için güvenli ve risksiz bir ortamı sağlanması. Günümüzde teknolojinin gelişmesi yapı sektörünü de etkisi altına almıştır. Yapay, sentetik, zehirli gaz salınımı yapan asbest, radon, formaldehit gibi içeriklere sahip yapı malzemeleri üretilmekte ve kullanılmaktadır. Nefes almayan, yalıtılmış, kapalı birer kutu gibi oluşturulan yapılar sağlık problemlerinin başlamasına neden olmakta, insan yaşamını olumsuz etkilemektedir. Çalışmada bu paralellikte belirlenen doğal bir yapı malzemesi olan kerpicin olumlu doğal yapısı ile son derece önemli ve günümüzde çok daha anlam kazanmış olan yapısal konfor şartlarını karşılamasına dikkat çekilmiştir. Geri dönüştürülebilirliği, eskimezliği, ekonomikliği ve ekolojik çevreye sunduğu sayısız katkı göz önünde bulundurularak modern yapı kültürüne kazandırılması amaçlanmıştır. Sağlık ve çevresiyle uyumlu yapı oluşumunda yapı biyolojisi ilkeleri kapsamında iç mekan hava niteliğinin zenginleştirilmesi, ısı, akustik ve görsel konfor sağlanması ve sağlıklı malzeme seçimi konularında kerpiç kullanımının etkileri incelenecek, kullanıcı ve çevre odaklı olarak yorumlanacaktır. Yapı biyolojisi. 1960'lı yıllarda tıp doktoru Hubert Kahn tarafından Almanya'da kamusallaştırılan yapı biyolojisi bilimi, zamanının çoğunu kapalı ortamlarda geçiren insanların içerisinde bulundukları mekanın olumsuz, psikolojik, sosyolojik ve biyolojik etkileri nedeniyle rahatsızlık yaşamasının önlenmesi, kullanıcı ve çevresiyle uyumlu, sağlıklı yapı oluşumu için çalışır. Yapı biyolojisi bilim dalı, çeşitli tarih ediciler için kapalı yaşama ortamını araştıran bir yapı bilimi alanıdır. Dünya Bina endüstrisinin gelişimiyle birlikte inşaat ve malzeme teknolojisi de gelişmeler yaşanmıştır. Yeni üretilen malzeme ve geliştirilen inşaat teknikleri kullanımı sonucu yeni kuşaklarda çeşitli rahatsızlıklar başlamıştır. Bu zararlı etkiler yapı kullanıcısının duyarlılığına göre değişiklik göstermektedir. Hasta bina sendromu veya bina kaynaklı hastalıklar diye nitelendirilen bu rahatsızlıklar yapıda sorunlar çözülmedikçe kronikleşip daha da ciddi ölümle sonuçlanan boyutlara ulaşabilmektedir. Burada bir yapının insan üzerindeki sağlıksız bir yapı ortamının insan üzerindeki olumsuz etkilerini görüyoruz. Cilt üzerinde işte göz, burun, boğaz tahrişleri, baş ağrısı, düşük konsantrasyon gibi etkileri var. Yapı kaynaklı hastalıkların oluşumunu önleyebilmek için yapı biyolojisi ilkeleri dikkate alınarak yapılar tasarlanmalıdır. Yapı Biyolojisi ve Ekolojisi Enstitüsü'nün oluşturmuş olduğu 5 ana başlık altında toplanan 25 madde, burada gördüğünüz gibi bu ilkeler dikkate alındığı zaman yapılarımızda sağlıksal konfor sağlanması söz konusudur. Doğal yapılar ve kerpiç başlığı altında yerelde hazır olarak bulunan taş, ahşap ve toprak kullanılarak inşa edilen yapılar hem ekonomik hem de çok fazla enerji ve işçilik gerektirmediği için hem ekolojik hem de çok fazla enerji ve işçilik gerektirmediği için ekonomiktir. Taş ve ahşabın sınırlı olduğu alanlarda da toprak daha kolay elde edilebilirliği ile tercih edilen bir yapı malzemesi olmuştur. Toplayıcılıktan yerleşik hayata geçen insanların ilk oluşturdukları yerleşimler toprak kullanılarak inşa edilmiştir. İlk tarihlerden bu yana hayatın her kesiminden insanı içerisinde barındırıp bugüne ulaştıran kerpiç, dünyayı kurtarmaya yardımcı olacak doğal bina yöntemlerinin başında gelmektedir. Toprak temelli ürünler doğal olarak sürdürülebilir ve enerji verimlidir. Tarihin ilk çağlarında kili keşfeden ve taşın bulunmadığı alanlarda barınabileceği yapı için kullanan insanoğlu zamanla tecrübe ederek kerpici keşfetmiş, geliştirmiş ve günümüze ulaştırmıştır. Arkeolojik kanıtlara göre kerpiç 12.000 ila 10.000 yıl önce icat edilirken kalıplanmış kerpiç üretimi 7.000 yıl önce Mezopotamya'da gelişmiştir. Dünya genelinde koruma altına alınan yapıların büyük bir bölümü kerpiçten oluşmaktadır. Depreme dayanıksızdır diye küçümsenip unutulan kerpiç yapılar tarihine dönüp bakıldığında sanıldığının aksine yüzyıllardır ayakta kalan devasa örnekleri dünyanın en eski gökdelenleriyle Yemen'deki Şibam, Mali'deki Dijene Camii, İran'da Bam şehri gibi örnekleriyle adeta bu söyleme meydan okumaktadır. İlk çağlarından itibaren insanın ürettiği ve biçimini istediği gibi belirlediği ilk yapı malzemesi olan kerpiç, uygun oranlarda kil içeren toprağın su ve gerekli görülen katkı maddeleri ile harmanlanıp yoğrularak kalıplara dökülmesi ve açık havada kurutulması ile elde edilmiş, sonrasında da yığma yapı tekniği ile yapı inşasında kullanılmıştır. Günümüzde de kullanılabilen bu geleneksel yöntem çok fazla zaman aldığı için kerpiç teknolojisinde iyileştirilmelere ihtiyaç duyulmaktadır. Kerpiçin durabilitesi. Yani tabii ki kerpiç teknolojisi yenilenirken şunlara da dikkat etmek gerekiyor. Biraz önce de bahsettiğim gibi güvenilir yapı oluşturmak gerekiyor. Yani kerpiç yapının içerisinde konforu sağlarken önce o yapının güvenilirliğini sağlanması gerekiyor. Kerpiç yapı üretimi teknolojik olarak basit olsa da bozulmasına neden olan faktörlerden korunması yoluyla sürdürülebilir nitelikli dayanıklı yapılar üretme potansiyeline sahip bir yapı malzemesidir. Toprak malzemelerin ana zayıflıkları dayanıklıkla ilgilidir. Toprak taneleri su miktarına bağlı olarak nemlenirse mukavemet azalır, su fazla ve sürekli ise taneler birbirinden tamamen ayrılır, su ile beraber akarak giden yapı yıkılır. Kerpicin fiziksel stabilizasyon, yani karışıma organik madde katkısı, mekanik stabilizasyon, yani karışıma sıkıştırılması, kimyasal stabilizasyon, karışıma alçı, kireç, çimento ve benzeri stabilizatör karıştırmak gibi önlemlerle durabilitesi sağlanabilmektedir. Kerpiç yapı uygulamasında kerpicin konumlanacağı iyi bir zemin oluşumu önemlidir. Yağmur suyu, yeraltı suyu gibi kerpicin bütünlüğüne zarar verebilecek etkenlere karşı önlem alınmalı. Kerpiç yapı yüzeyi çatı çıkıntıları ile yüzey erozyonuna karşı korunmalıdır. Burada şekilde de yağmur etkisiyle ve zemin suyu etkisiyle yapı yüzeyindeki ve yapıdaki etkileri gözlemlenmektedir. Depreme dayanıklı yapı oluşumu konusunda Bilge Hocam detaylıca açıkladı. Burada ben basitçe üzerinden geçeceğim. Kerpiç yapı oluşumunda depremde oluşabilecek diagonal çatlamaların önüne geçebilmek için diagonal çatlama ve sonrasında duvardaki bu çatlamayla beraber heyelan oluşumunun önüne geçebilmek için geçmişte uygulanan bazı yöntemlerden yararlanılabilir. Bu yöntemlerden biri, yığma yapılarda malzemeyi örerken ara ara yatayda başka bir malzeme sırası ile tuğla, ahşap ve benzeri örgüde malzeme değişikliği yapılarak elastisite farkı oluşturup depremde bu alanda enerji söndürme işlemi gerçekleştirmektir. Bir başka yöntem ise kerpiç yapılarda karma sistem kullanmak, ahşap taşıyıcı sistemle takviye etmek, deprem ihtimaline göre alınabilecek iyi bir önlemdir. Bunu hımış yapılarda, ülkemizde de örneklerini görmemiz mümkün. Ayrıca toprak çatı örtüsü kullanımında toprağın altını tutacak malzeme olarak ahşap kullanılacaksa, ahşap tavan kirişlemelerinin aksları yaklaşık 40 ila 60 santim olacak şekilde yerleştirilmeli. Ahşap kirişler serbest bırakılmayıp birbirlerine gördüğümüz gibi yatayda ve çaprazda bağlantılarla sağlamlaştırılmalıdır. Kerpiç yapı biyolojisi, kerpiç %40 ila 50 sabit doğal nem oranına sahip olmasıyla biyoklimatik konfor sağlayan, yaşamak ve çalışmak için sağlıklı bir ortam sunan, gözenekli, nefes alabilen, kötü koku oluşumuna izin vermeyen, akustik konfor sağlayan bir malzemedir. Kerpiç yapılar statik elektriğe maruz kaldıklarında kerpiçin ana bileşeni olan toprak gibi davranabilir ve statik elektriği insan vücudundan uzaklaştırarak daha sağlıklı bir elektroiklim oluştururlar. Çok fazla yenilenemeyen enerji tüketmez, üretiminde çok az su kullanılır ve kullanım ömrü tamamlandığında geri dönüştürülebilir. Bir yapı malzemesine dönüşümü sürecinde herhangi bir kimyasal işlem gerektirmez ve hiçbir kimyasal veya endüstriyel atık üretmez. Kerpiç yapıların termal kütle özelliği sayesinde duvar yüzeyleri iç ortama sürekli depoladığı ısıyı salarak kullanıcı için ideal bir ısı ortam düzeyi sağlar. Kerpici yapı biyolojisi açısından değerlendirirken 5 ana başlıkta inceleyeceğiz. Kerpiçin yatayda yapılaşabilecek altyapı planlamasına uygunluğu, insanda aitlik hissettiren kültürel bir yapı malzemesi oluşu, doğa ile bütünleşebilmesi, ekolojik döngülere ve yerel koşullara adapte olabilmesi özellikleri sayesinde ekososyal yaşam alanı oluşumu için uygun bir malzemedir. Bu yapı biyolojisi ilkelerinin 5 ana başlıkta toparlandığını söylemiştik. Ekososyal yaşam alanı başlığı için bu tür özellikleri sağlayabilmekte. Kerpiç bulunduğu coğrafyanın toprak içeriğinde herhangi bir radyoaktif madde bulunmadığı durumda hiçbir şekilde zararlı salınım ve kirliliğe neden olmaması, yüksek termal özelliği sayesinde iç mekan dengesini yönetebilmesi, higroskopik özelliği ile iç mekanda nem dengesi oluşturabilmesi ve gözenekli yapısı ile iyi bir ses ve akustik konfor sağlayabilmesi ile yapıda iyi bir termal ve akustik konfor özelliğine sahiptir. Kerpiç nefes alabilen doğal bir malzeme oluşuyla mekanda sürekli temiz hava dolaşımı sağlayabilmesi, iç mekanda uygun nem dengesi oluşturması ile sağlığa zararlı küf, mantar, toz ve alerjen oluşumunu önleyebilmesi ve bu sayede iç mekanda kokusuz ve nötr bir hava ortamı sunabilmesi, içeriğindeki toprağın iyonizasyon özelliği sayesinde mekanda uygun bir elektroiklim oluşturması ve yüzeylerinde ısı depolayıp gerektiğinde radyan ısı salınımı yani ışınım yaparak iç mekanda ısıl konfor sağlayabilmesi özellikleri ile de sağlıklı bir iç mekan iklimi oluşturabilen bir malzemedir. Kerpiç, yerel olan toprağın yerel yöntemlerle tesis gerektirmeden, çok fazla enerjiye ihtiyaç duyulmadan yapıya dönüşümüyle enerji tasarruf ve düşük maliyetiyle ekonomik oluşu, inşaat ve tadilat süresince çevresinde olumsuz etkisinin bulunmaması, doğal bir malzeme oluşu ile en iyi yaşama döngüsü verilerine sahip olması özellikleri ile çevre ve enerji konularında uyumlu ve tasarruflu bir malzemedir. Kerpiç kullanılabilir özelliği ile oran, ölçü ve form konularında istenilen esnekliğe sahip oluşu, insanın tüm duyularına hitap edebilmesi, dokusu ve rengi ile sıcaklık etkisi, mekan örgütlemelerinde fiziksel ve mekanik özellikleri ile ergonomik tasarıma uygunluk sunması, yerel yapı kültürünün bir parçası olup zanaatlerle kaynaşabilmesi özellikleriyle insan odaklı tasarım için ideal bir malzemedir. Çalışmada elde edilen sonuçlar ekonomik açıdan değerlendirildiğinde bireysel olarak inşa edilen bir kerpiç yapıda yerel malzeme ve iş gücüyle yapılaşıldığı için yapım aşamasında ve kullanım süresince ekonomi sağlanacaktır. Sanayi ürünü olarak kerpiç kullanımında yapılaşma sırasında ekonomi sağlanamasa da kullanım süresince termal kapasite özelliği ile uygun iş mekan konforu sağlandığı için yaz ve kış aylarında ısıtma ve soğutma için enerji tüketimi en az seviyede olacaktır. Dolayısıyla bireysel ve ülke ekonomisi için büyük katkı sağlanacaktır. Ülkemizde yapı sektörüne yıllık yaklaşık 50 milyar dolarlık bir yatırım yapıldığı göz önünde bulundurulduğunda bu yapılaşmada kerpiç tercihiyle doğru orantılı bir enerji tasarrufu elde edilecektir. Dolayısıyla ülke ekonomisine katkı sağlanacaktır. Sosyolojik açıdan değerlendirildiğinde kerpiç ile yatayda gelişebilecek bir yapılaşma ile mahalle veya kasaba kültürü yeniden canlandırılabilir. Bu oluşum insan ilişkilerinde de unutulan ya da kopan bağları tekrar pekiştirecektir. Kültürel açıdan değerlendirildiğinde kerpiç yapı mirasımızın korunması sağlanırken mevcut kerpiç yapılarının işlevlendirilmesiyle iç ve dış turizme katkı sağlanır. Ayrıca kültürel öğelerin ve zanaatin harmanlanarak çağdaş kerpiç mimarisine dahil edilmesi, toplumu ortak bir noktada buluşturan ve bireylerin özüne sahip çıktığı bir gelecek sunar. Bilimsel açıdan değerlendirildiğinde, kerpiç sağlık açısından en uygun iç mekan kalitesi sunan, çevreye ve canlı hayatına duyarlı, üstün nitelikleri olan özel bir yapı malzemesidir. Sonuç olarak, değişen yaşama koşulları karşısında yapısal çözüm ve yenilikçi malzeme kullanımı dışında tüm canlılığı tehdit eden sağlıksız ortamların oluşumu ve kaynak tüketimini önleme noktasında yapısal ve sistemsel çözüme ihtiyaç vardır. Bu konuda kerpiç doğru bir çözümdür. Daha fazla insanın güncellenen kerpiç teknolojisini keşfiyle kendi özellikle ekolojilerine adapte olabilecekleri, sürdürülebilir doğal yaşama merkezlerini ve konutlarını inşa edebilmeleri mümkün olacaktır. Bu yeni oluşumu teşvik etmek ve ilerletmek için kentin kalabalık ve plansız yapılaşmasından uzak, yeni yerleşim yerlerinde geleneksel malzemelerin kullanıldığı veya güncellenen teknolojisiyle kerpiç binaların inşası konusunda gereken destekler sağlanmalıdır. Unutulmamalıdır ki doğru tasarlandığında kerpiç uygun maliyetli, çevre dostu, sağlıklı ve dayanıklı bir malzemedir. Dinlediğiniz için çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you. We would like to thank our presenter, Architect Pembegül, for her presentation. And now we are giving the floor to Civil Engineer Kenichi Curtis Onochi. You can start.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Kenichi Curtis Onochi, and this presentation is coming to you together with my professor, Aisha Bekri-Gubakis. The topic I'll be presenting is the benefit of earthen structures as building solutions during the COVID-19 economic crisis. And the outline for this presentation would cover introduction, the relationship between conventional building construction and COVID-19, earthen building construction and COVID-19, conclusion, and some references. As we all know, the coronavirus pandemic was discovered in Wuhan, China in 2019, and since this inception, it has greatly affected economies in the world, and the most hit economies are the developing economies. And this is actually as a result of the social inequalities that plays out. And also the introduction of the lockdowns, the social distancing, and the quarantine created serious effects on both financial, psychological, and in terms of financial, physical, and psychological effects on nations of the world. And in terms of building, before the pandemic, there have been a growing need for housing. There have been a serious deficit. And as a result of this pandemic, there have been rising inflation in every economy of the world. And this also includes the cost of building materials. And in this case, we really need an alternative building material. It has always been the case before the pandemic, and with the pandemic, it only grew worse. And earthen structures seem to be a very good alternative because it has proven to be simple to produce, cheap, and the materials are actually readily available. And also their contribution to the reduction of greenhouse gases to boost immunity also comes in handy. Uh, in terms of the relationship between conventional building construction and the coronavirus, we know concrete is the most common conventional construction material, and this is as a result of its superior mechanical properties, which includes compressive and flexural strength. And in the production of the concrete, cement is one of the most important materials. And cement happens to be a major contributor to the release of carbon dioxide from the decomposition of calcium carbonate and fossil fuels used for generating heat. And studies have shown that coronavirus has greater effects on people with low immune systems. And research have also shown that constant exposure to carbon dioxide actually increases deaths and it reduces the immune system, which could lead to death as a result of the coronavirus. Now, Sakar developed a model which he referred to as the coupled human environment system. It actually shows an interaction between humans and the natural environment during the coronavirus pandemic. And this is what the interaction looks like. So I'll just take one of the interactions to just buttress my point. And, during the coronavirus, there was lockdown and restrictions. And as a result of the lockdown restrictions, offices were shut down. And as a result of the shutdown of offices, businesses, and other workplaces, in which I would also include production plants for concrete, where we could have release of carbon dioxide and other harmful greenhouse gases. If you follow this, the red lines actually shows the positive impact, and the green lines, the red line shows the negative impact, and the green line shows the positive impact. And if we follow this, we could see that this leads to improved air quality. And as a result of improved air quality, we have reduced pollution. And the reduced pollution in terms would lead to reduced infection and death rates. Also, I think that's the relationship I just talked about. Then for the earthen building construction, like I mentioned earlier, there's a deficit, which the World Bank projects, of 300 million new houses needed to meet the housing needs. And there's also growing pressure on governments to close this gap as a result of the rising housing demands, even during the pandemic, because during the lockdown, everyone was asked to stay at home. And we know that there's a huge chunk of homeless people all over the world, and the need for providing adequate and affordable housing to the less privileged and low-income earners would always be related to production and the cost of construction materials, and also the technology. And the result of this, as a result of this deficiency, this deficit, sorry, of housing, shelter homes, because when the lockdown was when the lockdown was declared, everyone was expected to be at home to reduce the spread of the virus. And those who were homeless were actually forced to move into shelters. And this resulted in overcrowded shelters, which was very common, especially in the United States. And this also led to the spread of the coronavirus. Now, the influence of construction materials and technology on the environment can not be overemphasized. Earthen buildings provides great environmental benefits as well, as we earlier mentioned, due to their decrease of CO2 emissions and also the regulation of indoor humidity. And we have another figure here, which
Excuse
shows us.
me, Mr.
Yes.
Kenichi,
Yes.
attendees are asking if you can make full screen presentation.
Oh.
It would be easier
Okay.
to read.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
Thank
I
you.
hope it's better now. All right, thank you. Yeah. So for our figure 2, it shows a cost comparison of different building materials for a single-story, 70 meters squared, 2-bedroom housing. And from all indication, you can see that the building constructed of concrete blocks showed about 37.4% increase compared to that constructed of rammed earth, and about 18.5% increase compared to that constructed of stabilized soil blocks. And we also have some advantages of thermal comfort with respect to thermal conductivity, resistivity, diffusivity, indoor and outdoor temperature and cooling heating loads, which is shown in table 1. For example, if we look at the first one, which shows comparison between soil blocks stabilized with fly ash versus cement bricks in low-cost housing. You can see in the earthen materials, there is a thermal lag of 7 hours. So which means it takes about 7 hours for the material to absorb the heat and to dissipate it, compared to other construction material. In this case, we're referring to concrete because it is versus cement bricks. And we can see that also the maximum indoor temperature is about 29 degrees Celsius maximum and 14 degrees Celsius minimum, compared to 34 degrees Celsius and a minimum of 14 degrees Celsius of concrete. This would also improve the thermal comfort. And if we go below, also we would see for the gypsum stabilized earth blocks, Alka versus concrete blocks, we can see that producing gypsum stabilized blocks involves calcinations of 125 degrees Celsius, compared to producing concrete blocks, which involves centering at 1,100 degrees Celsius. Now, research have also shown that earth materials are poor conductors of heat, and hence they slowly absorb heat in the day, thereby leaving indoors cool, which explains the thermal lag. The use of heating and cooling systems can also be minimized, hence reducing costs during the pandemic. For example, during the lockdown, higher heating and cooling systems were used in conventional building materials compared to earthen building construction. And the energy consumption in developed countries is known to account for about 50% of the total energy consumption of buildings. It is also observed that adobe buildings are thermally efficient in summer due to its good resistance to heat travel through the wall, which can be explained from the thermal lag as well. This is as a result of thermal mass of its compositions. Now, in conclusion, it's common knowledge that since COVID-19 virus surfaced, it has severely affected countries all over the world, and the need for alternative building materials continues to grow as a result of the growing demand for housing. And earthen structures also proves to be economical due to their simple production techniques. They are cheap, they are readily available building materials compared to the conventional materials. And stabilized soil blocks such as Alka, gypsum stabilized earth, shows more improved properties compared to rammed earth. And also the production process of these earthen structures also improves the environment by reducing greenhouse gases, which would contribute to health, the boosting of the immunity, and general well-being during the COVID-19 pandemic. This thermal comfort can also be achieved without rising heating and cooling and ventilating costs. Right, there's a few references. Thank you for listening. I hope I was in time.
Thank you, Mr. Kenichi.
Thank you
And
so
now we
much.
move to the third presentation by architect Shadizare Shahabadi.
Ruba Hoca, sanırım bu sunumu yapacak olan konuşmacılarda bir rahatsızlık galiba söz konusu koronavirüsten dolayı. O yüzden onu atlamamız gerekecek. Geçmiş olsun dilekleriyle.
Okay, unfortunately, it seems that the presenters have some problem, coronavirus, so we wish them to be recovered very soon. So also, unfortunately, our fourth presenter, Associate Professor Ufuk Fatih Koçuk Ali, had some unfortunate circumstances and he apologized of being with us today. So we are moving directly now to the fifth presentation by architect Didar Tashkan. Mr. Kenichi, if you can stop sharing your screen.
Okay, yes, I just did that, sorry.
Yeah, I think everyone can see.
Also, you can make a full screen
Yeah,
of
sure.
the presentation. Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah. Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank you all who has organized and contributed to the conference. Also, I'd like to thank to my advisor, Ebroma Polat, for her lasting support. This topic I'll tell you about is formed under three notions: cultural heritage, accessibility, and cultural roots. I'll try to explain the relationship between them in the context of the two ICOMOS charters and with an example, Yazd City. As we all know, cultural heritage is some kind of bridge between the past and the future. Heritage refers to the past by revealing historical background, usage of material and technology, sustaining tradition, knowledge, and culture. Cultural heritage is seen as a value to be protected regarding Contemporary Preservation Act. On the other hand, in some cases, it has been reduced to an object that must contribute economically to its environment. Sometimes we forget about its identity and meaning, unfortunately, so heritage became fragile. And this fragility has direct proportion with profitability. Debates on accessibility date back 1960s in Italy. In the 1990s, accessibility became relevant to architectural restoration. When it came to 2005 and 2008, access to cultural heritage idea took place in international declarations, charters, and management guides, such as Faro Convention or the ICOMOS charters. Accessibility has gained a wider perspective starting from 2010. Through this perspective, heritage is not only a physical structure. It exists with its environment and living culture as well. In order to preserve identity, meaning, and significance, a holistic approach is legitimate to defining conservation strategy. Briefly, accessibility notion is transforming, and from a distinct group-based praxis, like you can see in the slide, access for disabled persons, these are most argued ones, and the reachability, it forms towards a multidisciplinary, inclusive, dynamic, and innovative concept. This new concept in conservation can ease interpretation and correct communication. As you can see here, we need three elements that we can appreciate cultural heritage: accessibility to information, accessibility of monuments, environment, or site, accessibility of shared responsibility. Preservative activities constitute practice, or we can say action, to access to cultural heritage. In order to fulfill these activities, there are three forms of accessibility: physical accessibility, intellectual accessibility, and economic accessibility. In addition to this, tourism becomes the main accelerator for local development day after day. In some cases, it's getting hard to manage and sustain existing balance between contemporary development and sustainable use. Accessibility management with holistic approach can be the answer in order to keep this balance. A holistic approach widens and complicates the framework. A methodical solution is needed to analyze, set, and organize. In this matter, cultural roots might be a solution as a part of accessibility management. It incorporates both tangible and intangible cultural heritage and creates opportunity to experience it. As I told in the beginning in this presentation, accessibility management of cultural heritage through cultural roots will be discussed in the context of two ICOMOS charters: the ICOMOS Charter for Interpretation and Presentation of Cultural Heritage Sites, and the ICOMOS Charter on Cultural Roots. This conceptual framework will be evaluated in the example of Yazd, Iran. Yazd is the biggest living earthen city today with a distinct skyline. Historical city of Yazd has been added to the list of World Cultural Heritage in 2017. Location of Yazd is in the plateau of Iran and is close to spice and Silk Roads. While most of the earthen cities were destroyed by modernization, and in that challenging desert climate, Yazd maintained its original texture and its authentic elements and developed within different states. In the city of Yazd, buildings are built of earth, which is highly effective material to provide, build, and retain air conditioning, particularly in existing geography. Earthen material is part of cultural diversity of Yazd city. Its traditional districts, which are generated a spatial urban fabric with narrow alleys, qanat system, traditional houses, bazaars, Husseinians, mosques, synagogues, and as you can see in the pictures, like Zoroastrian temples and historic garden of Dolatabad, are pieces of that living organism. Traditional living, festivals, and ceremonies are also inseparable parts of this living organism that reflects complex structure of Yazd. Qanat system is a substructure that gives life to the cities. Persian Qanat is also in the World Heritage List. We can see here Qanat of Sarj in Yazd and Hasanabad of Mujir, and their buffer zone, you can see. Interpretation of Qanat system and the organic tie along with wind towers, cisterns are especially important to understand the essence of Yazd. Whereas the Qanat system goes underground and lies into the desert, it became hard to track. At this point, providing physical accessibility might be a problem. If so, which other alternatives do we have? Since access to cultural heritage is a human right, how can we ensure that everyone has access to the distinctive essence of Yazd? If Qanat system is the substructure of Yazd, these two ICOMOS characters are founding substructure on this notion with their main principles and defining elements. When we look all these principles like access and understanding, information sources, planning and sustainability, or preservation of authenticity, in the ICOMOS Charter for the interpretation, presentation cultural heritage sites, we can comprehend that there is a need for a tool to set and organize this holistic perspective in a cultural heritage site. Defining elements of cultural roots, as you can see right, which takes place in the ICOMOS Charter on Cultural Roots, can supply an integrated method. In the last 2 decades, large expansion of interpretive activities with new technologies and developing new economic strategies have created new complexities. The ICOMOS Charter for the Interpretation and Presentation of Cultural Heritage Sites defines the interpretive activities such as community gatherings, educational initiaries, training and research. There you can see on the slide community gatherings and security training with demonstration at the down right, which are held by Iranian Cultural Heritage, Handicrafts and Tourism Organization during nomination progress. According to the Charter, presentation activities provide the bond between interpretive content and the cultural heritage. And I believe that accessibility management procures the communicative and cumulative structure with its subheadings: physical, intellectual, and economic accessibility. These presentation activities can be traditional fests and informative output, or activities due to time, place, and user. Of course, on the other hand, digital age completely changed our perspective about getting information on something. So how can we access the information about YAST on the digital platforms? It can be through formal or informal channels, as we can say, websites. One of the formal channels is Visit Iran, as you can see down. There you can read about cultural diversity of Iran, Iranian cities, and their specifications. Moreover, there are suggestions of specific routes that points there is a common thinking on accessibility of cultural heritage using routes as a bond. Onto that, you can find suggestions according to season and, most importantly, 360-degree visuals of heritage sites. While we're having a major disaster like COVID-19, online access to cultural heritage is one of the current arguments, if it's right or wrong to reach the cultural heritage fully online. On the other hand, we can't overlook that everyone has the right to access the cultural heritage, and it's a necessity of using digital instruments, such as virtual reality or augmented reality. Economic accessibility consolidates the relationship between stakeholders that depend on each other to support and sustain the development of existing environments. Iran has a national strategy on preserving cultural heritage that underlines specific topics. Like identifying, protecting neighborhood, or behind the Preservation Act, Iran. Our physical access facilities, such as signage for heritage sites, information boards, or info points, are effective enough, especially for places which are usually visually limited, like cistern, or unseen on the surface, like Connaught wells. An on-site control mechanism and some kind of virtual tools can help to experience the place without being there. When it comes to presentation of cultural heritage, the cultural rules system provides a comprehensive macrostructure. Cultural rules offer systematic, dynamic, and organized concepts which reflect the rich diversity of cultural heritage. Experience is the key goal in cultural rules concept, because experience creates a bridge between heritage and human. The concept of cultural roots is detailed in the ICOMOS Charter of Cultural Roots by formalizing methodology. 6 main planning stages, as you can see on the slide. Accessibility can be crystallized using these stages as main headings. Cultural roots carry the perception of similar cultural heritage sites to the upper scale. A route can connect Yazd to other earthen cities with similar characteristics, as well as it can promote functional unity of Yazd. In the World Heritage Nomination text, it is presented as a descriptive item that Yazd has been close to ancient roads, such as the Spice Road, the Kermanjarian Road, and Khorasan-Fars Silk Roads. That is one of the strengths of Yazd. And some of others are, it's an earthen city like Kashan and Bam. It's the World Heritage Site, of course, and has somehow related to others like Persian Gardens and Persian Qanat. So, overlapping goals are briefly explains the essence of the matter. It is believed that accessibility management will contribute to the preservation of cultural heritage. Accessibility is not a preferable action plan. On the contrary, it's a requirement that maintains the link between cultural heritage and human. Consequently, the use of cultural rules as a tool brings a systematic and dynamic point of view to the accessibility management. It's a concept that's coherent with traditional and innovative components of interpretation and presentation actions. It might be possible to transform a simple action into an enjoyment of cultural heritage for everyone, I think. Thanks for listening and wish you all good and healthy days.
Thank you, Dida, for your presentation. And now we are moving to the last presenter in our session, Associate Professor Dr. İrem Gençer from Yıldız University. Ms. Didar, if you can stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Can you see my presentation now?
It's okay now.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to thank KERPIC' Academy and Fatih Sultan Mehmet University and all the organizers of this conference. This paper I prepared with my partner, Associate Professor Gökçe Tuna Taygun from Yıldız Technical University, and our title is Evaluation of Documentation and Inventory Studies on Earthen Buildings in Turkey within the scope of sustainability of vernacular architectural heritage. And the content of our paper is, as you see here, we'll briefly mention traditional earthen architecture and focus on documentation and inventory studies regarding earthen architecture, mostly international studies and some national studies, and then we will make an evaluation of these studies. As a building material, earth can be defined as environmentally sensitive. Its binder is clay soil acquired from nature, and it is used to construct buildings in various sizes and functions since the earliest human settlements. Earth architecture, whether in the form of monumental buildings, as you see here, or modest houses, constitutes an important part of the world's cultural heritage. Adobe is a building material formed by kneading and molding the soil by water and drying it in the open air. Binding materials added to the soil during its construction during the manufacturing process have some effects on improving the mechanical properties of adobe. The most important benefits is to increase the water resistance and also to increase its compressive strength. And here we see a model of a traditional adobe house in National Building Museum, of adobe bricks as load-bearing walls covered with mud plaster. History of earthen constructions in Turkey dates back to more than 5,000 years, as you see here in one of the most famous sites, Çatalhöyük Neolithic site in Turkey. Besides archaeological sites, earth is also widely found as a building or structural material in traditional buildings in Turkey. For example, in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Anatolia, adobe or soil constitutes the wall construction or the roof constructions, while in other regions, adobe blocks are used as an infill material in timber frame structures. Even though recognized as a cultural property, earth buildings are under the impact of natural and anthropogenic threats, such as extreme weather conditions, floods, earthquakes, urbanization, industrialization, modern construction techniques, lack of proper maintenance, and also oblivion of traditional building technologies. In Turkey, earthen architecture, as you see here in Darende, a traditional adobe house, earthen architecture can mostly be found in vernacular or rural settlements. There are several international organizations working on the documentation and inventory and also protecting of earthen heritage at risk. Since 1970s, the International Council of Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, and the International Scientific Committee on Earthen Architectural Heritage, a sub-body of ICOMOS, ISKEA, are working actively on preservation of earthen structures. There is also Getty Conservation Institute in the United States, and also UNESCO's World Heritage Program on Earthen Architecture. And there was an EU-funded, European Union-funded project named Terra Incognita. And there is also another organization called Proterra, which can be listed as similar organizations related with earthen heritage. Since 1970s, ICOMOS and ISKEA organized Terra, a series of international conferences, to promote the exchange of information and greater understanding of earthen buildings. The focus of these conferences range from archaeological sites to existing earthen structures, conservation methods, construction techniques, management planning, cultural landscapes, and also disaster preparedness and mitigation. In 1997, the Getty Conservation Institute joined with several other organizations for a cooperative framework called Project Terra for the promotion of research and conservation of earthen architectural heritage. As a result of this project, a bibliography on earthen architecture was compiled that includes different scientific fields related with earth architecture, such as mineralogy, clay science, and soil science. And also a comprehensive literature review was prepared within this project. UNESCO World Heritage Program, partnering with ICOMOS, ISKEA, and other institutions, has established WEEP, World Heritage Earthen Architecture Program, in 2008. In 2012, World Heritage Inventory of Earthen Architecture, as you see the title here, was published for elaborating policies on conservation, revitalization, and valorization of the 150 properties, earthen properties inscribed on the World Heritage List, and to increase capacity building at regional, national, and site levels. The inventory study revealed that a quarter of the sites are included in the World Heritage List in danger are earthen sites. And we see some examples from the outcomes of this project and the statistics around the world regarding these World Heritage earthen properties, their types, construction techniques all over the world, and also in specific regions, such as here in Africa. And also an example of the inventory sheet here. What are the criteria for including this World Heritage site on the list, and also what are the risks of its preservation? A European Union-funded project, Terra Incognita, focuses on the protection, promotion, and revitalization of earthen architecture in Europe. An inventory of European construction in Europe was prepared, which is also depicted on this map, as you see here. This map indicates the historical and vernacular earthen architectural heritage, which is built before 1970s and is still present. Even though there is no scientific institution focusing on earthen heritage in Turkey, Turkish Academy of Sciences, TÜBA, has been working on the documentation of vernacular and rural heritage in Turkey since 2001, including earthen structures. TÜBA has established cultural inventory project with the aim of preparing inventories, compiling digital databases of these inventories, and defining problems and innovating solutions for the preservation of cultural heritage in Turkey with the help of academic members, experts, and researchers. Within this project, 2 pilot regions were selected first. One is Buldan in Denizli in the Aegean region of Turkey, and the other one is Birecik Suruç, which is in Şanlıurfa in the southeastern Anatolia. After these 2 pilot projects, then the project disseminated into other regions of Turkey. Another important contribution to documentation of earthen heritage in Turkey that is worth mentioning is this KERPIC' network, which has been conducting researches on durability, seismic response, and production techniques of earthen constructions in Turkey for more than 30 years, which also includes this conference series. Evaluation of documentation and inventory studies on earthen buildings in Turkey within the scope of sustainability of vernacular heritage. Vernacular architecture is the manifestation of both the tangible and intangible assets of culture, combining traditional construction techniques and local materials, which presents a morphological response to environmental conditions, socioeconomic and cultural characters of societies. The preservation of vernacular architecture includes sustaining traditional livelihoods and building practices, supporting the social and economic dimensions of sustainability, as you see here. Therefore, there is so much to learn from site-specific and vernacular resources in terms of physical and social resilience. The socioeconomic changes in Turkey in the last decades have made adobe buildings less desirable, leaving most of these structures in a neglected, abandoned, deteriorated, and even partially destroyed condition. The inventory, documentation, and the detailed study of the production and construction systems of traditional earthen architecture in Turkey is an especially important and urgent issue, considering that adobe architecture is being rapidly dilapidated and destroyed. So, some concluding remarks. The intrinsic knowledge accumulated in vernacular heritage over the ages is very valuable, especially with the rapid technological advancements, mass building constructions, and ever-increasing natural and man-made disasters. Vernacular sites are comprised of a rich variety of building types, embracing different beliefs and living practices, climatic conditions of the territory, and the use of traditional local building materials. Therefore, the inventory and documentation studies are conducted in Turkey and around the globe with the aim to preserve and ensure the sustainability of vernacular heritage. These studies can be used for determining the physical conditions and preservation status of earthen buildings, listing earthen buildings and sites when applicable, renovating and repairing the dilapidated earthen buildings and sites, recording the architectural history of Turkey, recording the traditional construction techniques and materials and differentiating between the varieties across different regions, preservation of cultural heritage and assuring its sustainability, and learning from vernacular architecture when creating new designs in harmony with the environment and climate and using resources efficiently, and also supporting livelihoods economically and socially by reviving traditional construction techniques. Thank you for listening, and these are some of the references we have used in our study. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. İrem, for your presentation. And now we can start receiving your questions. If you have any questions to any of our presenters, you can send in written format. Okay. I see that we are not receiving any questions. In that case, we came to the end of our first session. I would like to thank again all the presenters for their contribution. And now I can leave the floor to my colleague, Dr. Ali Dost Ertuğrul, who will chairing the following session.